Seattle's late autumn rain tapped gently against the windows of Daniel Hayes's condo, the kind of rhythmic drizzle that once made the evenings feel intimate. Now it only emphasized the emptiness between him and Emily. Their home, tastefully modern, minimally decorated, a testament to Emily's PR world elegance, had become a museum of silence. Daniel sat at the small dining table with his laptop open but untouched. The blue light cast sharp shadows under his eyes. He had been staring at the same line of code for nearly an hour, unable to focus. His mind drifted, again, to the growing tension at home, the subtle shifts he had been pretending not to notice. Emily was in the living room, typing furiously on her phone. The screen illuminated her features, high cheekbones, perfectly maintained hair, and eyes that used to look at him with warmth. Now they rarely looked up at all. He tried to remember the last time she smiled at him without forcing it, or the last time they talked about anything other than schedules, deadlines, or household logistics. He wasn't sure anymore. Marriage didn't die in explosions, he thought. It died in the quiet. "Are you eating tonight?" Daniel asked finally, his voice low as if afraid of interrupting the silence rather than a person. Emily paused, still staring at her phone. "I have a late call with a client. I'll just grab something after." It was always something. Client meetings, brand emergencies, late-night campaigns. Emily had built her career on managing other people's crises, yet somehow never seemed to face the crisis brewing in her own home. Daniel nodded, though the answer hurt more than it should. He could feel her drifting, not just emotionally but physically. When she sat beside him, she angled her body subtly away. When she hugged him, her arms stayed stiff. When he reached for her at night, she pretended to be asleep. He told himself it was stress, work, fatigue. But even lies repeated too often eventually felt thin. Later that night, Daniel stood by the apartment window overlooking the city. Seattle glowed beneath the misty rain, streets reflecting neon lights, cars gliding through the damp air, life happening for people who seemed to have everything he had lost. Emily walked past him with a blanket draped around her shoulders, heading toward the bedroom. Her face was pale, exhausted, drawn. "Good night," she said softly. There was no kiss, no touch, not even a glance. Just a closing door. Daniel closed his eyes, breathing in deeply. The weight in his chest felt immovable, like a stone he'd been carrying for months. He wondered how they had arrived here. They met in their 20s, two ambitious dreamers who planned road trips and picked out dog names long before they could afford rent. Marriage had felt inevitable, easy even.
But adulthood wasn't the dream they imagined. Careers consumed them, expectations mounted. Social media praised perfect couples, and Emily pushed herself to be one of them. Daniel retreated into work, avoiding confrontation. Slowly, silently, the space between them grew into a canyon now filled with suspicion. One night, weeks before today, Daniel had walked into the room unexpectedly while Emily was texting someone. She startled, pulling the phone close to her chest. He didn't ask then, but the fear in her eyes stayed with him. Tonight, that memory resurfaced sharply when he heard a faint vibration from the bedroom. Emily had left her phone behind. A message lit up the screen, just the preview. A man's name he didn't recognize. His pulse quickened. He didn't pick up the phone. He stood frozen, breath shallow. He told himself not to jump to conclusions, but the dread was familiar, heavy. Relationships didn't recover from this kind of doubt. He knew it. And he was tired of being the only one trying, tired of the distance, tired of feeling unwanted in his own marriage. He wasn't sure when he first thought about divorce, but tonight, for the first time, an answer formed in his mind. Maybe it was time. Emily emerged from the bathroom, wiping her face with a towel. She spotted her phone on the bed and quickly grabbed it, her expression tightening for a brief second before she masked it. Daniel noticed. he always noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked, though he already knew the answer he'd get. "Just work." Work. Always work. But the way she held the phone, close, guarded, told another story. And in that instant, something inside Daniel quietly cracked. He turned off the bedroom light and lay down on his side of the bed, facing away from her. The mattress barely dipped under her weight when she gathered her blanket and curled into herself. Between them, a distance of only inches, but emotionally, miles. Rain whispered against the window, as if trying to soothe a house that no longer knew how to hold warmth. Daniel stared into the darkness, the thought forming clearly, painfully, maybe ending it will hurt less than staying. That was the moment their marriage began to break, silently, without a drama, without an affair he could confirm, without a fight. Just the quiet collapse of two people who had forgotten how to reach for each other.
The next morning arrived with a cold, colorless light filtering through the curtains. Seattle's familiar gray sky settling over their bedroom like a second blanket. Daniel woke before Emily, as he often did lately. She slept curled on the very edge of the mattress, her back turned toward him, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, as if trying to protect herself from something unseen. He watched her for a moment, not with tenderness, but with a quiet, aching distance. He used to know what she dreamed of. Now he wasn't sure he even knew who she was anymore. He slipped out of bed and headed to the kitchen, the wooden floor cool beneath his feet. He made coffee mechanically, his mind replaying snippets of the previous night, the vibration of the phone, the unfamiliar name, the way Emily had grabbed it like a lifeline she didn't want him touching. He hated feeling suspicious, hated feeling like a stranger in his own marriage. But suspicion, once fed, grew fast. Emily eventually entered the kitchen, hair loosely tied, wearing a soft gray sweater that hung slightly off one shoulder. She looked tired, more than tired, worn down, but she still offered him a polite smile, the kind you give coworkers, not husbands. "Morning," she said, reaching for a cup. Daniel nodded. "Morning." Silence settled between them again, thick, fragile. They sipped coffee in parallel universes. Then her phone buzzed, a short, distinct tone, one he didn't recognize. Emily's eyes flickered toward the sound with a flash of guilt or fear before she quickly picked up the device and turned away, shielding the screen. Daniel didn't speak, but something inside him twisted sharply. When she walked to the hallway to read the message in private, the twist became a cold, consuming certainty. She's hiding something from me. Later in the afternoon, Daniel was at home alone. Emily had left for the office after a vague explanation about an urgent client pitch. Her perfume still lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the scent of coffee that had long gone cold. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dresser where Emily had left her planner, her earrings, the necklace she only wore on important days. He remembered giving her that necklace on their 5th anniversary, back when she still looked at him as if he was her safe place, not an obligation she had to manage. His phone buzzed with a Slack notification from work, but he ignored it. His thoughts were too loud. Last night's message, the secret of behavior, the emotional distance, the late nights, the way she flinched when he entered a room unexpectedly. Individually, they were nothing. Together, they were damning. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands, trying to steady his breathing. He didn't want to be the kind of man who snooped. His father had once told him that trust was the foundation of any relationship, and without it, everything else collapsed. But trust had limits, and love didn't mean blindness.
That evening, when Emily returned home, she kept her phone close, always face down, always within reach. She typed quickly, hiding her screen under the table, under her sleeve, under anything she could. When he entered the room, she locked the device instantly. It was impossible to ignore now. At one point, when she went to shower, the phone lit up again. She had placed it on silent mode,
but the screen's glow reflected faintly onto the nightstand. Daniel froze. His heart thudded with a mix of fear and anger. He didn't touch it, not yet, but he stepped close enough to see the preview of the message before it disappeared. A name. The same name from the night before. "Call me if it gets worse." His stomach tightened. Then another message appeared, rapid, urgent. "You need to tell him eventually." Daniel's breath stopped in his chest. The room spun slightly, as if the air itself had shifted. Tell him what? His pulse hammered at his temples. He couldn't hear the shower anymore, only the pounding of his own heartbeat. He stepped back when he heard Emily turn off the water, retreating to the hallway like a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel and exhaling steam, she looked at him with the softness he couldn't recognize. "What's wrong?" she asked. He opened his mouth ready, maybe for once, to confront her, but the words died. He wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. Not like this. So he shook his head. "Nothing, just tired." Emily hesitated, studying him with an unreadable expression. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay." She walked past him, leaving a faint trail of perfume and warm air from her shower. He watched her go, his chest heavy with a pain that felt almost physical. Later that night, Daniel sat on the couch alone. The glow of the TV flickered across the room, though he wasn't watching. Emily was in the bedroom again, phone pressed close, whispering into it, with her back turned toward the door. He couldn't hear the details, only fragments carried through the crack of the doorway. "I know, I'm trying." "No, he doesn't suspect." "Yes, I will, I promise." Each sentence landed like a blow. Daniel's breathing became shallow. His hands trembled. He felt suddenly cold despite the heater humming quietly in the background. When Emily finally ended the call and stepped out, she nearly collided with him. Her eyes widened. "Daniel, I didn't know you were—" "Who were you talking to?" he asked softly. Her lips parted, searching for an answer. She couldn't find fast enough. "Just work," she said, voice thin. A lie. So fast, so effortless. Daniel nodded slowly. He wasn't angry, not visibly, just empty. "I'm going to bed." "Okay." They walked in silence back to the bedroom. Two strangers sharing a life built on memories and rituals, not love. Emily turned away from him again when she lay down. Her breathing steadied. Daniel stared at the ceiling. He didn't cry. He didn't break. He didn't speak. He simply accepted the truth his heart had been resisting. This marriage was ending. And tomorrow, he would take the first real step, one he could no longer avoid. He would call the divorce attorney again.
Daniel woke with a hollow heaviness in his chest, the kind that makes the morning light feel intrusive rather than warm. Emily was already up. He could hear her in the kitchen, moving quietly, too quietly, like someone afraid to disturb a fragile structure that might collapse at the slightest touch. He dressed without thinking, tugging on a dark sweater and grabbing his laptop bag. His reflection in the mirror startled him. He looked older than 38. Eyes dim, jaw tense, shoulders carrying too much weight. This can't go on. It was the first clear thought he had in weeks. When he entered the kitchen, Emily straightened instantly. Her phone was again face down on the counter, as if glued that way. "Morning," she said, smiling softly. The smile hurt him more than anything else. It felt rehearsed, like she had practiced it in the mirror before he woke. Daniel poured coffee, avoiding her eyes. "Morning." Another stretch of silence, the kind that had replaced their intimacy. He took a sip, breathed in the bitter comfort, then said quietly, "I'm going to the office early today." It was a lie, one of the few he had permitted himself. But he needed time, distance, a place where her voice didn't echo through the walls. Emily nodded. "Big day?" He shrugged, something like that. Her eyes lingered on him a little too long, as if she could sense the shift in him, but didn't know why. Or maybe she did know why, and was pretending, the same way he had been. Pretending their marriage was something more than a dying flame. The moment Daniel stepped outside, the cold Seattle air hit him sharply, waking every nerve. He walked quickly, hands shoved deep into his pockets, the city's gray skyline reflecting his mood. He didn't go to the office. Instead, he drove to a small coffee shop on Capitol Hill, a place he used to work from when he and Emily were still dating, back when life felt lighter. Inside, the smell of roasted beans and warm pastries wrapped around him, but it didn't bring comfort like it once did. He found a secluded table in the corner and opened his laptop, not to work, but to stare blankly at the divorce attorney's website he had bookmarked weeks earlier. Samuel Rhodes, Family Law. He remembered hesitating the first time he visited the site. Now his hand didn't shake, his decision didn't waver. The cursor hovered over the schedule consultation button. He exhaled shakily. This was real. He clicked. The form autofilled. Name, contact, preferred date. He selected tomorrow at 2 p.m. His finger paused over the final button. Submit.
He pressed it. The confirmation email arrived within seconds, glowing coldly in his inbox. It felt like a verdict. Daniel closed the laptop slowly, resting his palms against the surface as if grounding himself. His throat tightened, a pressure rising from somewhere deep. Grief, anger, exhaustion, loss, all tangled together. He whispered into the quiet space, "I tried. God, I tried." And he had, more than he had ever admitted. But love wasn't enough when the other person didn't reach back. Or worse, reached for someone else. He drove aimlessly afterward, through the streets lined with wet leaves and neon reflections. Seattle always had a way of looking melancholic, even on good days. Today, it felt like the city understood him perfectly. At a red light, Daniel saw a young couple crossing the street, hands intertwined, laughing under a shared umbrella. He used to imagine that was him and Emily. Now he couldn't imagine them sharing anything at all. His phone buzzed with a message from her. "Hope your day is okay. Thinking about you." Daniel stared at the words until they blurred. Thinking about you. A hollow line from someone who kept secrets, someone who whispered into phones late at night, someone who had already emotionally checked out, or worse, checked into something else. He didn't respond. Back home that evening, the apartment felt colder. Emily stood at the dining table sorting through mail, mostly bills and work-related envelopes. She looked up when he entered, eyes softening. "You're home early," she said gently. He shrugged off his coat. "Wasn't much to do." "Oh," she hesitated, then added, "I thought we could maybe get dinner together tonight. Just us?" He froze. Dinner. Together. Now, when he had already scheduled their ending? He forced himself to breathe evenly. "Maybe another time. I'm tired." Emily nodded too quickly, her disappointment barely hidden. "Of course. Sure." She turned away, pretending to tidy the mail, but her hands shook, a small tremor he wasn't supposed to see. Daniel watched her, the slope of her shoulders, the way she bit her lower lip, the effort she made to seem composed. For a fleeting second, he wondered, does she know I'm slipping away? Is she trying to stop it? Or is she just afraid of losing control of the narrative? He didn't ask, and she didn't tell. They continued their silent choreography through the evening. Casual words, routine movements, polite distance. Two ghosts haunting a marriage that used to be alive. Before bed, Daniel stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights spread beneath him, shimmering against the wet pavement. A gentle wind brushed past, crisp and quiet. He felt more alone than he ever had in his life. Not single, not married. Just to spend it between what once was and what was about to be. Tomorrow he would sit across from a divorce attorney and speak the words he had never imagined saying about the woman he once believed was his forever. His chest tightened painfully. "Emily, why didn't you just talk to me?" he whispered into the night. The wind offered no answer. Behind him, through the sliding glass door, he saw Emily in the reflection, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring down at her phone. Her shoulders trembled. Just once. He turned away. Whatever she was hiding, whatever she was crying about now, it was too late. He couldn't save a marriage where he no longer felt welcome. And tomorrow, the ending would finally begin.
The next morning unfolded in quiet fragments. Sounds of soft footsteps, muted drawers opening, the faint rustle of clothing. Daniel lay still in bed, eyes half open, letting the familiar noises of their shared routine wash over him one last time. Emily thought he was asleep. He didn't correct her. Her silhouette moved across the bedroom in the dim light, delicate, hurried, almost fragile. She pulled on a cream blouse, slipped her phone into her pocket, checked herself in the mirror with an anxious glance, then exhaled as if preparing for something heavy. Daniel closed his eyes before she turned around. A few moments later, he heard her voice in the hallway, soft, whispering, controlled. He assumed she was just making a work call. That's what he told himself until he caught the first real sentence. "It's getting worse," she said, voice trembling. Daniel's eyes snapped open. He stayed perfectly still. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "No, he doesn't know I'm calling you again," she whispered. "I'm trying to keep it together." A pause. Then, "I don't know how long I can hide it." Daniel's heart stuttered painfully. Hide what? Hide what from me? He sat up slowly, careful not to make the bed creak. His breath felt trapped in his throat. The walls suddenly felt too thin, too transparent. Emily's voice broke slightly. "Yes, I know I should tell him, but he's already pulling away. If I say it now, if I put it out there, it'll destroy whatever's left." Another pause. "No, it's not like that. There's no one else," she said, almost defensively. "Stop assuming that." Daniel froze. His hands curled into fists without meaning to. Her tone grew softer, more vulnerable. "He used to be my safe place. Now I can barely look at him without feeling like everything is crumbling." A wave of guilt, or something like it, hit him hard. He didn't expect that. "I don't know what he's thinking anymore," she whispered. "Every time he walks past me, I feel like I'm losing him." Daniel swallowed. The taste in his mouth was metallic, bitter. This wasn't how he imagined hearing the truth. He thought it would be cold, sharp, damning. Instead, it was heartbreaking. He leaned slightly forward, desperate to hear more. But then, Emily's voice dropped lower, almost a mumble. "No, I haven't told him about the tests yet." Tests? Daniel's pulse spiked. "Because I don't want him to panic," she continued, "or think I've been hiding it on purpose. I'm not ready for the questions. Not yet." He went still. Completely. Tests. Hiding something. Telling him eventually. His mind raced through possibilities. Illness, infidelity, personal crisis, something at work. But none fit neatly. None explained the late-night whispers, the urgency, the fear in her voice. Then came the sentence that twisted everything inside him. "I'm scared it might be serious," Emily whispered. "The doctor said it could be nothing. Or it could be something we can't ignore." Daniel's breath caught. A cold wave washed over him. She wasn't talking about another man. She wasn't talking about betrayal. She was talking about herself. Her health. The phone conversation went quiet. Then she whispered, "I'll tell him soon. I promise. I just need one more day. I need to find the right way." Daniel slowly lowered his head into his hands. His chest tightened, not with suspicion this time, but with something heavier, something that made his limbs feel numb. Guilt. Fear.
a sudden clarity that knocked the air out of him. He had been preparing for the end, preparing to walk away. And all along, Emily had been preparing for something else entirely. Pain. Illness. Bad news. Something terrifying she had been carrying alone. Her throat burned. For the first time in weeks, he felt the weight of everything he didn't know, of everything he had assumed, of all the silence they had wrapped around themselves. Emily ended the call quietly. He heard her footsteps approach the bedroom, and he lay back down, eyes half closed, pretending. The door opened softly. "Daniel?" she whispered. He forced his breathing to stay steady. A moment passed. Then she let out a small, fragile sigh and closed the door again. When he finally got up, she had already left for work. The apartment felt unnervingly still. Daniel stared at the empty hallway, seeing her shadow in every corner. Her fear, her exhaustion, her whispered, "I'm scared." He moved to the kitchen slowly, each step sinking heavier into the hardwood floor. The morning sunlight stretched across the counter, illuminating the coffee mug she hadn't finished. He picked it up. The ceramic was still faintly warm. "How long has she been going through this alone?" he whispered to no one. He sat down at the table, buried his face in his palms. The divorce consultation. The button he had pressed. The decision he had made. Everything in him twisted. He had believed she was hiding betrayal, but she had been hiding pain. He felt like he couldn't breathe. As he stared at the soft glow of his phone, the calendar notification for tomorrow's appointment stared back at him mercilessly. Meeting with Samuel Rhodes, 2 p.m. His thumb hovered over it. He didn't delete it. Not yet. But for the first time, he questioned it. Not because things were fixed, not because they were suddenly okay, but because something deeper than his anger began to swell. Something he had nearly forgotten. Concern. Fear. And a quiet, aching love he thought had died. He whispered into the empty kitchen. "Emily? What are you not telling me?" The day ahead felt heavier than any he had lived in years. And for the first time, the end he had prepared didn't feel as certain as it had yesterday.
Daniel didn't sleep that night. The house felt colder than usual, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the words he had heard. Clara's quiet confession to Emily, spoken with a tremble that suggested she had been holding it inside for months. "I never stopped loving him, but I don't know how to reach him anymore." The sentence looped in his mind like a haunting melody he couldn't turn off. He sat at the kitchen table long before sunrise, both hands wrapped around a mug he never actually drank from. The sky outside slowly shifted from black to gray, and he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. Fear, guilt, anger, and something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Longing. Clara's footsteps descended the stairs sometime around 6. Usually he would pretend not to hear her. Years of silence had trained them into a cold choreography, but today he lifted his head. She froze at the bottom step when she saw him awake, showered, and sitting with an unreadable expression. "Dan?" she whispered, voice raspy from sleep. "You're up early." "We need to talk." His tone wasn't harsh. It wasn't cold. It was something steadier, unsettling even to him. Clara blinked, surprised by the lack of hostility. She tightened at the robe around her body, her fingers trembling slightly. "Okay," she murmured. She sat across from him, clasping her hands as if preparing for an autopsy of their marriage. For a moment, neither spoke. The refrigerator hummed in the background, the only sound in a house filled with words they never said. Daniel inhaled slowly. I heard you, he finally said. Heard you... What do you mean? He didn't look away. Yesterday, you and Emily. I was in the hallway. Her color drained from her face. Oh my God. Her breath caught, and she pressed her fingers to her lips. Dan, I didn't mean for you to hear that. But I did. Silence flooded the room. Clara leaned back, eyes brightening with tears she didn't yet let fall. Then you know, she whispered. Daniel swallowed. I know you think I don't want you anymore. She closed her eyes tightly, her shoulders sinking as though a weight was finally too heavy to carry. It felt true, she said. Opening her eyes, you barely looked at me for months. You stopped talking to me except about bills or schedules. You never touched me unless it was accidental. And you thought it was because I didn't love you anymore. I didn't think, she corrected softly, opening her eyes. I feared. Her honesty hit him harder than her accusation. He rubbed his hands together, a nervous tell he hadn't realized she still noticed. Clara watched him with a desperation that was almost painful to observe, her eyes pleading without words, as if the next sentence would break them for good. I was going to file for divorce, he admitted. Clara gasped, a small wounded sound that broke like thin glass. Her hand flew to her chest. You were... serious? Yes. Her fingers trembled against her robe. Because of what? Because of how distant we've been? Because I failed to be the wife you needed?
He shook his head. Because I thought you didn't love me anymore. Her eyes filled instantly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Daniel, no. No, that was never true. I didn't know how to talk to you when you were hurting. I didn't know how to fix something when you kept saying everything was fine, but shutting down a little more every day. He looked away, not in anger, but shame. I was trying to protect you from my stress, from my frustration, from feeling like I wasn't enough for you or for my job or for anything. Clara leaned forward. You don't have to protect me from you. Her voice trembled. I married you, all of you, even the parts that struggle. A long moment passed. Daniel's voice lowered. When I heard what you told Emily, I realized how much I've let you think you were alone in this. And I realized I was losing you, she whispered. I thought it was already too late. He shook his head slowly. It wasn't. Clara looked at him as though she didn't believe she deserved the possibility he was offering. Her lips parted, trembling. Dan, do you still love me? It was a question she had never asked before, not even in their worst fights. It sounded fragile, childlike, as if she feared the answer might shatter her completely. Yes, he said quietly, more than I've known how to show. Her hand flew to her mouth again, a sob escaping. She hunched forward, trying to muffle the sound, but it filled the room anyway, raw, aching, the kind of cry born from months of fear and silence. Daniel stood. For the first time in what felt like years, he reached for her, hesitantly, then fully, pulling her into his arms. She pressed her face against his chest, the robe soft against his shirt, her hands trembling as they clutched the fabric at his back. I'm sorry, she whispered into him. I'm so sorry for everything. Don't, he said, voice thick. I'm sorry too. They stayed like that until her sobs quieted, replaced by the soft rhythm of her breathing. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were swollen but clearer than they had been in months. What do we do now? She asked. He exhaled. We start over, or at least we try. Clara nodded, wiping her cheeks. I want that. I want us. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a very long time. Then we fight for it, together. But deep inside, beneath the fragile hope, one truth lingered like a shadow. The hardest part wasn't the confrontation. It was everything that had led them there, and everything they would have to face next. He didn't know if forgiveness would be enough. He didn't know if love could undo months of silence. But for the first time in a long while, he was willing to find out. The morning after their confrontation unfolded like unfamiliar territory. Quiet, but not cold. Tentative, but no longer hostile. Daniel woke around 7 to the faint scent of coffee drifting through the hallway. For years, Clara had stopped making coffee for both of them, switching instead to her own almond latte routine. Today, the aroma was different. Ground beans he recognized, the ones he used to choose because Clara said they reminded her of their first apartment in Boston. He descended the stairs slowly, unsure of what version of their marriage he was stepping into. Clara stood at the counter, stirring 2 mugs. She startled when she heard his footsteps, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her robe was replaced by jeans and an oversized sweater. Simple, comfortable, the kind she wore before distance became their default. "I made yours how you like," she said softly. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the delicate uncertainty of healing something long neglected. Daniel approached the table, sat, and accepted the mug. Their fingers brushed for a fleeting second, an accidental touch that felt more significant than any kiss they'd shared in the last year. "Thank you," he said. It was a small sentence, but it carried weight. Gratitude, acknowledgement, effort. Clara sat across from him. Her eyes were swollen but hopeful, like someone who had cried themselves empty and now had space for something gentler. For a moment, they simply drank. No tension, no hostility, just an unfamiliar quietness that felt almost sacred. Daniel cleared his throat. "Yesterday was a lot." "Yes," she whispered, "but maybe necessary." He nodded. "I didn't expect us to talk like that, honestly. I thought the moment I told you about the divorce, you'd just accept it." Claire's brows nodded. "Accept losing you? Dan, I was terrified of it. I just thought you'd already gone." There it was, the truth that had lived between them like a locked door. "I never left. I shut down, but I never left." Clara's lips parted, trembling slightly as if she'd been waiting months to hear those words. They spent the next hour talking. Really talking, for the first time in years. Not about logistics or the house or bills, but about themselves. Clara described the loneliness of sitting next to someone she loved and feeling invisible. Daniel admitted how the pressures at work made him feel like he was failing as a husband. They stumbled, hesitated, paused to gather courage, but they didn't walk away. Still, there were walls, thick ones, the kind that years of silence build. Around noon, Clara suggested something unexpected. "Dan, would you take a walk with me?" He blinked. "A walk?" "Just around the block." She shrugged. "I want to be somewhere that isn't this house, somewhere without all the echoes." Daniel hesitated, but then nodded. "Okay." They stepped outside. The autumn air was crisp, the kind that carried a faint smell of damp leaves and distant chimney smoke. Clara wrapped her scarf around her neck as they walked down the sidewalk, a comfortable distance between them. Not distant, but not intimate, either.
Neighbors passed with friendly greetings, neither of them fully heard. The world felt too normal compared to what was happening inside them. At the corner, Clara slowed. "Daniel, there's something I haven't said." He braced himself, heart tightening. She took a breath. "When I said I didn't know how to reach you anymore, it wasn't just about communication. I started assuming the worst. Not because you gave me a reason, but because I was afraid." He frowned. "The worst? About what?" Her voice cracked. "That maybe there was someone else." Daniel stopped walking. Clara kept her head lowered. "I know you didn't cheat. I knew it even then. But I hated that the thought existed at all, because that's how far apart we'd become." He exhaled slow and long. His instinct wasn't anger. It was grief. Grief for the version of her who sat up at night doubting whether she still mattered to him. He stepped closer, careful not to startle her. "Clara, there was never anyone else. Not even close." She nodded, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. I know, I wanted to tell you, because keeping that fear inside built walls I didn't know how to break. A pause. Then Daniel said something he hadn't planned, something that came from a place he thought was long dormant. We break them together. Clara lifted her gaze to him, eyes shimmering. He continued. The walls, the silence, the doubt, we tear them down together, one brick at a time. Something warm flickered across her expression, relief mixed with disbelief. They resumed walking, but the air between them had shifted. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. She noticed how he tapped his thumb against his palm when he was thinking. They remembered each other in real time. Halfway home, Clara reached out, not to hold his hand, but to lightly brush her fingers along his. A tentative gesture, an invitation, not an expectation. Daniel hesitated for half a second. Then, he gently intertwined their fingers. Clara exhaled shakily, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. They continued walking like that, fingers interlaced, steps matching, walls slowly cracking. When they returned home, Clara stopped at the doorway. Dan? Yeah. She swallowed. Thank you for not giving up on us yesterday. He looked at her for a long moment. Thank you for still wanting us. They stepped inside. The house didn't feel as cold as it had the day before. Something had shifted, barely noticeable, but real. A fragile beginning. But fragile beginnings are beginnings all the same. And for the first time in a long time, they weren't facing them alone.
The rest of the afternoon unfolded with an uneasy calm. Gentle, fragile, almost too delicate to touch. Clara spent an hour reorganizing the hallway closet, something she only did when her mind was full. Daniel retreated to his office, not to distance himself, but to breathe, to process the weight of everything they'd said and everything that still needed saying. Outside, the sky thickened with soft gray clouds, the kind that muted the light and made quiet introspection feel inevitable. Around 5, Daniel stepped out of his office and found Clara sitting on the living room floor, legs crossed, a half-open box of old photographs spread around her. She looked up when she heard him. Her expression wasn't sad, just contemplative, caught between memory and possibility. Hey, she said softly, do you have a minute? Of course. He crossed the room and sat beside her. Clara picked up a photo from the pile, a picture from their early days, taken during a spontaneous road trip to Maine. In the photo, Daniel was laughing at something she'd said, head tilted back, eyes bright. Clara leaned into him with that open, unguarded affection she used to wear so effortlessly. I haven't seen these in a long time, she murmured. Daniel studied the photo. We look like a different couple, a couple untouched by silence, fear, or the long erosion of unspoken hurt. Clara placed the photograph between them. I kept these here because I thought one day I might need to remember who we were. She glanced at him. Today felt like that day. Daniel exhaled. Clara, we're still those people. We just lost sight of each other. She shook her head gently. No, we became something else. Something smaller. Something that hurt. She reached for a second photo. This one from a Christmas party years later. Smiles more forced, distance subtle, but unmistakable. And I don't want to pretend that didn't happen. Daniel felt that truth land painfully in his chest. Neither do I. Clara set the photo down and folded her hands, as if gathering courage. Dan, we can't fix anything unless we decide what we're actually trying to save. Her voice trembled slightly. Are we fighting for the idea of us, or for the real us? He hadn't expected the question, but it pierced him in the exact place that needed piercing. What do you mean? Clara looked around the room. The couch they bought in a rush, the rug they once argued about, the framed prints they'd chosen together before choosing things together became rare.
"This house," she began slowly, "is full of things we picked when we still believed we knew our future. But somewhere along the line, we kept the things and lost the future." She rubbed her thumb against her palm, a nervous habit she'd developed in the past year. "I think we need to choose what remains. Not just objects, but beliefs, fears, expectations, and what we're finally ready to let go of." Daniel understood. Not fully, but enough. "We can start," he said quietly. "If you want." She nodded. "I do." They spent the next hour sorting through the photographs and small mementos, ticket stubs, love notes from earlier years, travel brochures from trips they never took, postcards he used to leave in her purse just because. For some, they laughed softly. For others, their silence carried a different ache.
Soon, the living room floor became a map of their history. Moments, milestones, missed chances. Clara held up a faded note he once wrote during their first year of marriage. "You make everything brighter," it read in his handwriting. Her eyes softened as she read it, and after a long moment, she placed it in the keep pile. But when she picked up the planning sheet from their canceled anniversary trip, she held it for only a second before placing it in the let go pile. Daniel watched her carefully. Does letting something go mean it doesn't matter anymore? She shook her head. No, it just means we're making room for something new. For a while, they worked in quiet harmony, each choice small but symbolic. And then, without warning, Clara paused over a photo he didn't recognize. It was a picture of her at a cafe, alone. Even in the still image, she looked tired, distant, as if holding herself together by a thread. He swallowed. When was that taken? Last year, Emily took it. Clara traced the corner of the photo with her thumb. It was the day I told her I wasn't sure if you even saw me anymore. Daniel felt the sting, the kind that burrowed deep. Clara, I'm sorry. I know. She placed the photo gently in the let go pile. That version of me, I don't want to be her anymore. There was something profoundly vulnerable in the way she said it, quiet but resolute. She wasn't just letting go of a memory, she was letting go of a version of herself shaped by fear and isolation. Daniel moved closer. I don't want to be the man who made you feel that way. Clara lifted her gaze, meeting his. Then don't be. His breath caught, because the challenge wasn't harsh. It was hopeful. Okay, I won't. As the last few items were sorted, Clara looked around the room. It's strange, she said softly. Everything looks the same, but it feels different. Daniel followed her gaze. Maybe that's how rebuilding starts. Nothing outside changes at first, just the space between us. She gave him a small, tired smile. And what do you want to keep from us, Dan? He didn't hesitate. The part where we still choose each other. Clara inhaled sharply, emotion flickering across her face. And the part we let go, she asked. Daniel reached for her hand, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. We let go of the silence, he said, and the fear. Her fingers curled around his. They sat there, hand in hand, surrounded by pieces of their shared life, some kept, some discarded, all acknowledged. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. Then maybe we really can start again. Daniel exhaled, the quietest relief settling in his chest. Yeah, maybe we can. Outside, the clouds finally broke, letting a soft glow filter through the curtains. Light that wasn't bright or dramatic, but warm enough to feel like a beginning. A small one, a fragile one, but a beginning all the same. The morning sun filtered gently through the curtains, painting the living room in a warm, forgiving glow. For the first time in weeks, Daniel woke without the weight of dread pressing on his chest. The apartment felt lighter, not because anything had changed outside, but because inside, the walls between them had shifted. He found Clara already awake, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a notebook in her lap. She scribbled quietly, occasionally pausing to stare out the window. The coffee mug in her hand sent small spirals of steam curling toward the ceiling. Daniel hesitated at the doorway, absorbing the serenity that felt almost unreal. "Morning," she said softly, looking up.
Her eyes had that familiar warmth, steady, attentive, present. "Morning," he replied, moving to sit beside her. He noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the page, a remnant of the tension she carried for months. But it was tempered now by resolve. They didn't speak at first. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was comfortable. A shared understanding that words alone could not convey. Daniel reached out, placing his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. "Last night, when we chose what remains, I think I finally understood something." Clara tilted her head, inviting him to continue. "It's not just about the past, or even about the mistakes. It's about how we move forward, together or apart. The past is heavy, yes, but it's not the future. Not if we're willing to see each other, truly see each other." Clara's lips curved into a tentative smile. "I've been afraid that seeing each other now might hurt more than letting go." Daniel shook his head. "It won't, not if we're honest. Not if we let ourselves feel everything, the fear, the hurt, the longing, without letting it control us." She considered this for a moment, her eyes tracing the faint patterns of sunlight on the rug. I think I'm ready to feel again. Not to pretend, not to hide, but to really be with you." He reached closer, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, gentle, deliberate, an unspoken acknowledgement of the trust they were rebuilding. "Me too," he said. "I'm ready." For a while, they simply sat there. No past grievances, no looming decisions, just the quiet rhythm of presence. Daniel realized how much he had missed the simple act of being near Clara without walls between them. He had assumed the distance was permanent, but now it felt temporary, something they could navigate, brick by brick, word by word, touch by touch. After breakfast, they ventured outside together, walking slowly through their neighborhood. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked leaves. People passed them, exchanging friendly nods, oblivious to the subtle miracle unfolding between the two. Clara leaned into him slightly, letting her hand brush against his. He responded instinctively, looping his arm around her shoulder. No declarations were needed. Their closeness said everything. At the corner park, they paused by a bench overlooking a small pond. Ducks glided across the water, ripples spreading outward and fading into calm. Daniel thought about the months they had spent apart emotionally, the cold nights, the whispered doubts, the conversations never had. And now, in this quiet morning, he felt a clarity that had eluded him for too long.
"It's strange," Clara murmured, watching the water. "We've been carrying so much weight, and suddenly it feels like we can put some of it down." Daniel nodded. "It's not all gone, but we know what to carry together now and what to leave behind." Clara turned to him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude, relief, and something deeper, hope. "I think I understand now. Love isn't just about feeling good. It's about seeing each other, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, and choosing each other anyway." Daniel's chest tightened. The simplicity of her words belied the complexity of what they meant, but he knew she was right. Love wasn't perfect. It wasn't free from doubt or fear, but it was persistent. It was deliberate. It was the choice to remain, even when leaving would be easier. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Then let's choose each other, every day. And let's be honest about the fear, the hurt, the longing, about everything." Claire's lips quivered as she smiled. "Yes, every day." They lingered there, on the edge of the park, letting the morning sun wash over them. Daniel realized that understanding, true understanding, wasn't about answers or resolutions. It was about presence. It was about seeing someone fully and still deciding they belong in your life. As they walked back toward their apartment, hand in hand, the city around them felt less imposing.
The clutter, the noise, the endless routines, all of it faded into the background. What remained was them, their shared history, their mistakes, their fragile hopes, and the quiet promise that they would navigate it together. Back inside, Daniel paused at the doorway and looked around. The apartment was unchanged, still the same furniture, the same walls, the same scattered memories. Yet everything felt different, because the weight had shifted, because they had shifted. Clara watched him, sensing the change. She stepped closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "We can rebuild," she whispered. Daniel exhaled, a soft laugh escaping him. "We will. Slowly, carefully, but we will." And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet evidence of a life they had both nearly abandoned, they understood something neither had before. That love wasn't about perfection, nor about erasing the past. It was about choosing what remains, and nurturing it with intention, honesty, and courage. Outside, the city carried on, lights flickering, cars humming, people moving. Inside, in their small, imperfect apartment, a new understanding had taken root. Fragile, delicate, but unyielding. And for Daniel and Clara, it was enough.